This question comes from This is Patrick. He says, out of these options, which do you think is the best defensive tackle to trade for if we decide to do so? Sheldon Richardson, Vinnie Curry, Eric Armstead, Carl Davis, Steve McClendon, or Jared Odrick? So for me, out of all of those guys, the only one who's played at a consistent high level for a consistent amount of time is Sheldon Richardson. Obviously, he's a former Defensive Rookie of the Year. He still is a great defensive player. He's obviously part of one of the better defensive lines in football, and he really is a big part of that. Super talented guy, can rush the passer, super stout against the run, and super athletic for his size. So I think if I was a GM and I was going to trade for one of these guys, it definitely would be for Sheldon Richardson. Now, the Miami Dolphins have came out and said, if you didn't hear about it, that if the young prospects that we drafted don't pan out and they're not ready to be NFL defensive linemen, they're looking for a rotational player. So if we did trade for Sheldon Richardson, the Jets just want off their roster. I think he would be more than that. I think he would definitely be a starter next to Sue. So if you're just looking for somebody to just be in rotation for sub packages, the guy that I really like is Eric Armstead. Eric Armstead, he's only 23 years old. He's a beast. Last year, I think he had 2.5 sacks. He's played slow, and this year he's made a point to lose weight so he can pick up his speed because he is a 3-4 defensive tackle. But the man he's just a large dude. The man is 6'8". His wingspan is ridiculous. To me, he's an athletic freak. Him next to Sue, that would be ridiculous. And I think he would be the perfect rotational player, if not starter next to Sue. And he would definitely help us against the run. So I like Sheldon Richardson a lot. I think out of all those guys, he's the most talented, especially in a 4-3 defense. I think he could definitely help us in pass rush situations and against the run. And he's obviously familiar with the AFC East. And then you have Eric Armstead, who I think he's only 23. And same thing with Sheldon. He's really young. Both of them haven't even hit their primes yet. And they still have put really good tape together. So for a starter, Sheldon Richardson for sure, and definitely a Pro Bowl talent. If you're looking for a rotational defensive tackle, Eric Armstead. This question comes from Will. He says, of all the free agents we've lost in the last 5 years, who would you bring back besides Olivier Vernon? This is a hard question. This is tough. I mean, there's people like John Jerry, who could have been a better guard than we've had in the last 5 years. Obviously, with Dallas Thomas and Billy Turner, that would have been better. Then you look at Charles Clay, who lost to the Bills, who hasn't really panned out for the Bills. He's obviously been injured, but we've really suffered from tight ends. We haven't had a tight end since Charles Clay. I'm going to pick, we didn't necessarily lose to free agency, but we lost to a scandal, is Richie Incognito. Richie Incognito still is one of the best guards in the NFL, and that whole situation was ridiculous, obviously. Obviously we kicked him off the Dolphins, and then he, can't play football for a year. But Richie Incognito, when he was a Dolphin, was one of the best interior offensive linemen in the NFL. He was a Pro Bowl caliber talent. He's still a Pro Bowl caliber talent in Buffalo. And he would have definitely helped our guard woes for many years. If you obviously when he left, huge hole there. That we tried to replace with many different people. But, when you look at our team now and you look at our team last year, if we could just have Richie Incognito, that's lights out. Could you imagine Richie Incognito and what he brings to the table from a run blocking standpoint? He's one of the more physical run blockers. He just, you talk about when you see a pop when a quarterback says hike, it's Richie Incognito. He's one of the more mobile guards in the NFL. He's one of the smartest guards in the NFL, especially on blitz pickups. He's a beast. And could you just imagine him in an Adam Gase offense where he's blocking for one of the best power back in the NFL, and Jay Ajayi, and Jay's running behind Richie? Are you kidding? Our offensive line still would not have to suffer from guard problems if we never let him go. And it would have been a totally different team. Our team would just be totally different, and we wouldn't have had all those offensive issues for the last how many ever years since Richie got since 2013. So it was a huge mistake on our part. Again, it left a hole in our roster for many years after that. And if we could just have Richie now with the guards that we have now, like obviously Ted Larson, Jermon Bushrod. Jermon's, ailing. He's not the same player he used to be. this is probably his last year in the league. If we could have him now with Jay Ajayi and our offensive talent, which is the best offense Richie would have ever played for, our team would be basically unstoppable. This question comes from Jaden Underwood. He says, do you think another linebacker would be a good idea? Love the starters, but without Koa, depth makes me uneasy. This is a great question. Something that we've seen in training camp that's very encouraging is that Neville Hewitt looks like he's taking even bigger steps. Every year that he's been in the league, he's gotten better. And then when you look at Mike Cole, he actually got first-team reps the first day of training camp. So he's looked better than he did last year. So they're improving the backups. Not a lot of people know about Neville Hewitt. But Neville Hewitt is a really good coverage linebacker. When you look at the tape, I think, what was it, 2015? Or it was 2016 technically, but it was the end of the 2015 season. Against the Patriots, he did a tremendous job. He actually had a stretch of games down the end of that season where he did a tremendous job in coverage. He's a great nickel linebacker, coverage linebacker in sub packages. He's an explosive athlete. He's great blitzing. If you up the A gap or something like that, he can get to the quarterback quick. He's off the charts. He's not a physical linebacker. He sucks in the run game. He's not good in between the tackles, but anything in coverage he's great at. And blitzing off the edge or something like that, he can get to the quarterback fast if you give him enough of a hole to get through. But then you look at Mike Cole, and he's a very cerebral, super smart linebacker. The games that he has started in, he's played very well. He's been in the right spots. He's never really had a broken coverage. He's never missed an assignment or anything like that. He's always going to do the right things. But he's not the greatest athlete in the world. He's not the biggest linebacker in the world. So those are some of the things going against him. But if, let's say Lawrence got hurt, who would replace him? I would expect Neville to replace him, or excuse me, because Lawrence isn't going to play in the middle he's not going to play with middle linebacker. So yeah, I would expect Neville to replace him. I think Neville is having a great offseason so far. He's looked really good in training camp. And like I said, he's improving each and every single year. And he's a great coverage linebacker. He just needs to get better in the run game. He's just not physical enough. We've seen it happen before when Mike Cole and Neville Hewitt take over. Neville Hewitt's always done a great job in the receiving game, like I just said. And he's never done a bad job against the Arizona Cardinals. Perfect play, tip, pick, was in the right place at the right time. Never breaks assignment. Super smart linebacker. And he's a good vocal leader as well. So I think the linebacker depth is really good this year because the fact that since we've been injured with our linebackers over the last 2 seasons, Neville and Mike have gotten a lot of playing time, and that's really going to help them in their development as linebackers. And like I said, Neville continues to get better. Neville has potential to be a Pro Bowl linebacker if he can just be more physical. If he can just be a 3-down linebacker, he has potential to do it. If he ever will do that, I don't know. We'll see, but he has potential to do that. And Mike Cole, I think, is a solid backup. So I based on what we've seen of them in the past, I'm confident in those two. This question comes from Ronald. He says, why do you think Lawrence Timmons has gone on the record twice now saying, first, Miami's Dolphins defensive line is one of the best in the NFL, and today saying Sue is the best defensive tackle and the best of all time? What do I think of this? Okay, first of all, we're the best defensive line in the NFL. I think we definitely, in terms of defensive ends, and the depth that we've acquired, I think we have the best defensive end room in the NFL. I don't even think that's close. Especially, obviously, not a lot of teams run 4-3s anymore, but when you look at the 4-3 defense, I think the closest to us might be the Philadelphia Eagles with Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett. Maybe those guys, but maybe the Minnesota Vikings with Everson Griffin and Donnell Hunter. But other than that, I don't even. There's nobody even close. I mean, when you look at our depth, you got Cameron Wake. You got Andre Branch, who had 8 sacks last year. 8 sacks. He almost had double-digit sacks. He almost had 2 defensive ends and double-digit sacks. By the way, Andre Branch didn't start the entire 16-game season, so God only knows how many sacks he would have had if he didn't. He would have had 10 sacks if it wasn't for penalties. Stupid penalties in terms of our cornerbacks holding and stuff. But, yeah, so you got Andre Branch. You have Cameron Wake. Cameron Wake, one of the best pass rushers in the league. Charles Harris, who, in terms of, he's having the best offseason out of any defensive player, which is crazy. So Charles Harris, who I think Andre Branch came out and said today that he has a chance to be a dominant player in the NFL for a very long time. So Charles Harris, And then you have Will Hayes, who is a beast. He, on his own right, does his things well. He's a good pass rusher. He's a great run defender. So the depth of our defensive ends went from terrible to one of the best in the NFL. In my opinion, the best. I think, the only teams you can really compare them to is the Minnesota Vikings and maybe the Philadelphia Eagles. That's about it. But I don't think anybody goes deep down the lineup as we do. And that's going to be so awesome this upcoming season in terms of in the fourth quarters of football games. That's going to be so valuable, being able to switch in and out, keeping everybody fresh. And even if we do sub out, we have monsters at the defensive end position. But when you look at the defensive tackle position, that's a totally different story. Obviously, Sue is the second. He's a tie for me with Aaron Donald. And then you look at, obviously, we still don't know. Jordan Phillips hopefully lives up to his potential. And then you look at who's behind him. It's just a bunch of rookies, basically. So, in terms of defensive ends, it's not even close. You just can't really name. I'm talking about 4-3. When you look at 3-4 defensive ends, I would compare them to them too. I mean, Michael Ben, maybe the Seahawks with Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett, but they don't go as deep as we do. So, yeah, it's pretty impressive. But yeah. I really don't. In terms of defensive ends, yeah. But when you look at it as a collective defensive line, we're definitely in the top 10. Can we crack the top 5? Is the question, and I think that's up to Jordan Phillips, because if Jordan Phillips can reach his potential, because he's still a super talented guy, then yeah, we're definitely a top 3 defensive line in the NFL. This question comes from Steven. Or Stefan, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I get names wrong all the time. I apologize, but your name is on screen for all the people out there who want to correct me on that. I think your name is Steven or Stefan or whatever the heck your name is. He says, "How do you feel about the rushing attack? Can we lead the league in rushing with a breakout year by Kenyon Drake giving us a 3-headed monster like the 72 Dolphins?" This is a great question. So far in training camp, Kenyon Drake has looked really good, especially in the receiving game. And Jay Ajayi, obviously he's still Jay, so he's a god. And then Damian Williams is obviously the Swiss Army knife of death, which that I have copyrighted his nickname. But yeah, all of them are, great players. If Kenyon Drake can get more, I think he just needs to get more playing time. And Adam didn't know who the heck, he didn't even know who was going to be the starting running back, for God's sakes. If Kenyon is the true number 2 and we stick to that, then yeah, I think we can definitely have the same kind of Jim Kick, Mercury Morris and Larry Zonka backfield that we had back then. When you look at what Jay brings to the table, he just wears defenses down with his power, and he's pretty fast for a power back. And then you look at what Kenyon does. Well, he's just Mercury Morris to Larry Zonka. He's the lightning to the thunder. Kenyon Drake is just a quick change of pace running back, super elusive. Can break your ankles like Sean McCoy. He's that kind of elusiveness, and he's really big. He's like 6 feet. I think he's like 6'2", and Kenyon Drake a burner. And then we look what Damian Williams brings to the table. He's in the middle ground. He kind of brings a little bit of both. He's a great receiving threat. He's a really good power back. That Buffalo Bills touchdown is the perfect example of that. He's really tough to bring down, and he can also go for a breakaway touchdown. He's got that kind of speed. So all three do different things and definitely have the talent. And they're very similar when you look at all three of them compared to the backfield of the 72 Dolphins. J.J. Zonka, Kenyon Drake is Mercury Morris, and Damian Williams is Jim Kick. They're very similar playing styles. So yeah, I definitely would expect them to do that. And I think the second part of your question was, can we lead the league in rushing? That's another story. Now, obviously, the 72 Dolphins did, but I don't know, because Adam Gase game plans to what defense we play, and if somebody has a trash secondary, I would expect us to pass more. It's just a different league than it was in the 70s. Obviously, teams ran it more, but that has nothing to do with us leading the league in rushing. But Adam Gase, like I said, he just game plans for defenses depending on what their weaknesses are. He loves matchups. So, that might take away from some of the carries, but yeah, we definitely have the talent to. And like you make a really good point. They are very, very similar to Jim Kick and Larry Zonka and Mercury Morris. Very, very similar. So yeah, it's a great point. And they definitely have the talent to lead the league in rushing. When you look at the depth at in our running back group, it's pretty insane. and I would definitely rival them up against anybody's backfield. So if Shady and Michael Gillisley can do it with the Bills did last year, we definitely can do it with the three that we have. This question comes from the Man Gamer. He says, who do you compare Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker to? This is a great question. I think, Jarvis Landry is a lot harder, but Devontae Parker is easy for me. And the funny thing is Adam Gase used to coach him. He reminds me a lot of Demaryius Thomas. And when you look at Devontae Parker, and some people forget this about Devontae Parker, is coming out of college, coming out of Louisville, Devontae Parker was one of the best run after the catch receivers in the not in the NFL, excuse me, one of the we've ever seen come out of college. I mean, Devontae Parker is so good in the open field, and somebody who's 6'3" and that ability to be that elusive and that powerful. And running after the catch situations is pretty impressive. And Demaryius Thomas is the only one I've ever seen do similar things at that size. Is Demaryius Thomas. When you look at what Adam Gase did with Demaryius Thomas in Denver, all of those records, and probably the best offense in NFL history, to be honest. I mean, statistically they are, but what he did with Demaryius Thomas is run a lot of quick screens for him to get him in the open field because of how elusive he was in the open field. And I would expect the same thing to do that we do with Devontae Parker this upcoming season. We just suck at executing them. And that's why I think why you haven't seen it that much. It's just we last year we were terrible at it. But this year in practice, so far in training camp, we've seen we've ran it a lot in red zone situations, and we've executed it perfectly. And a lot of that I think is the addition of Julius Thomas. He's been a beast out there blocking on the perimeter. And I think he's going to really help us with that, because the thing you can do with Julius Thomas is you can line him out. You can split him outside like a receiver, and then you can run screens that way. We didn't do that with Jordan Cameron because Jordan Cameron sucks at run blocking, but Julius Thomas in training camp looks really good doing it, and that's something he did in Denver very well, is blocking on the outside. And that's not something you can do with Anthony Fasano either, is because he's not a threat when you line him, split him out like that. Julius Thomas is. So that's another thing that we didn't have last year in this offense, and I would expect some of those same things. And like I said, super similar in the way that they're both great run after the catch receivers. And the thing that they do very similar is obviously the 50-50 point ball. The fade route that Demaryius Thomas and Peyton Manning had, that chemistry, is something that we're going to see a whole lot more of this upcoming season. That's something you saw last year a little bit against the 49ers. You saw some of that, but this year especially, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. Devontae Parker and Ryan Tannehill have been their chemistry is unreal right now, especially in training camp. And I think you're going to see a whole lot more of that this upcoming season. A lot of the fade routes, the back shoulder fades, all of that kind of stuff is chemistry, and Demaryius Thomas runs it very well, and so does, I think, Devontae Parker runs it very well too because of his frame, and they're very similar in that way too. So I would expect Adam Gase to use DP more like he used Demaryius Thomas in Denver. They play super similar, and I think those are some of the reasons on some of the parallels they do very similar. Jarvis Landry is a lot harder because I seriously cannot, you hear a lot of people say Anquan Bolden, and I don't think it's even close. I think Jarvis is Jarvis is more, even when Anquan was younger, Juice is just more explosive in my opinion. I don't think Anquan was ever the threat that Juice is right now in terms of running after the catch. I just don't see it. And to be honest with you, Anquan Bolden has great hands, but I think Juice has better hands. And obviously Juice has been more productive in terms of catching passes in his first 2 seasons. It's really hard to find a comparison with him because I don't think we've ever seen a receiver with the ability and the power in run after the catch situations that Juice has. Have you ever seen anything like Juice is elusive, but he's also a freight train. He can run over people. Have you ever seen a receiver at his size that's like 5'11", barely, maybe 6 feet? I don't even think he's 6 feet. Be able to literally run over a strong safety or a free safety. It's insane. That play against the Jets where he literally ran over Marcus Gilchrist. No other receiver in the NFL can do that. And I don't think I've ever seen an NFL receiver ever that has it like that. I don't really have a comparison for Juice. I think Jarvis is one of a kind. I've never seen anything like that. He is a freight train and he's super elusive as well. So I've never seen those combinations within each other. Like Anquan Bolden, I've never considered super elusive, and I've never really considered he never had the power that Jarvis Landry had. But that's the comparison that keeps getting thrown out there, and I just don't really see it. But Devontae Parker for sure, he reminds me a lot of Demaryius Thomas, Because I've never seen, I mean, receiver that has that kind of frame, who's like 6 foot and up, and can run after the catch like that. The only one that reminds me of that is Demaryius Thomas. But yeah, Jarvis Landry is unique. This question comes from Will. He says, "What were your initial thoughts when we signed Sue? How do you feel about it now?" This is a great question. When we signed Sue, first of all, it took so long. I was like continually like refreshing the team stream that I honestly thought it wasn't going to happen, because there was a rumor that he was going to sign back because the contracts were pretty close, but then we ended up paying him more money. But anyway, Sue, I thought, was going to definitely catapult us to the Super Bowl, not the Super Bowl, to the playoffs. I thought he was going to lead us to the playoffs. I thought he was the missing piece. He was coming off arguably his best season as a pro. He looked like had one of the most dominant seasons a defensive lineman has ever had. Obviously, that never shows up in the stats, but you can't. He makes everybody around him so much better that I thought when he got to the Dolphins, Cameron Wake, Olivier Vernon, they were all going to have one-on-ones. Cam Wake's not going to get double-teamed. OV's not going to get double-teamed. They're going to eat. And obviously, OV had an 11-sack season before Sue got there. And a lot of people forget about that. Forget about OV having a double-digit sack season, but he did. And same thing with Wake. Obviously, he had many before that. So when you saw the talent on the defensive line, you're like, and then we get Earl Mitchell, who we really liked because he could never stay healthy. And guess what happened with us? He never could stay healthy. But I thought he definitely was going to make, because we already had Pro Bowl talent on the defensive line. I thought he was going to make everybody so much better that it would elevate everybody even more, and it's like who you're going to double team. So it ended up working out in the long run. But obviously that season was, that season was a disappointment. 2015 season, I think that was Sue's first year. It was just, that team just was not a team. I don't know whatever there was so much going on in that locker room and the leadership in the organization at the time, that if we could have just been a team, then if we had the culture that we had now with that team definitely would have been a playoff team. But it's unfortunate, on that team. I don't know why I'm reliving the 2015 season, but yeah, Sue, I thought definitely was going to bring us to the playoffs. Obviously, didn't happen, but Sue. This is something that people don't understand about Sue. You hear it all the time about how he just makes other people better. It's the best way I can explain it. He eats blocks up. You have to double team him. You sometimes have to triple team him. Leaving a running back in the backfield to chip him, for God's sakes, or just to help block him. He's one of the greatest defensive linemen in NFL history. I truly believe that. I think he's one of the most dominant defensive tackles in NFL history. For what he's done for the game of football, and how he's done to change it, and he's a great player. I think he's gonna go. I hope he stays a Fin for the rest of his career. I think he's one of the best moves the Dolphins have ever made. They brought one of the best players in his prime in the NFL at the time. He's still one of the best players in the NFL, and I think it was a great move. I hope he finishes his career as a Fin. I want him to be known as a Dolphin for the rest of his career. And I think coming season, he's going to have his best season he's ever had. I truly believe that. I think with the talent at the defensive end position, and like I just said, how he makes everybody else better, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be really, really crazy. And this team is a tight-knit group. They're basically a family. So this team is going to play together. They're going to win together, and it's going to be amazing. And I think Sue's going to have his best season this upcoming season. I think he's going to reclaim the throne as the best defensive tackle in football. Because right now, people don't know. It's either Aaron Donald or Sue, depending on who you ask. But, yeah, so I think it's a great move. I hope he finishes a Fin. I hope he's known as a Dolphin for his whole career. And when he puts on the gold jacket, I want people to think that's a Dolphin and not a Lion. I know that sounds mean to say, but that's what I hope. So, yeah. That has been your Miami Dolphins fan Q&A for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. A lot of great questions. Here's something I want to tell you guys. Continue to ask questions. Continue to post them down. So when the podcast comes around, we have even more questions to answer. Just because this video is out doesn't mean you have to stop asking questions. I appreciate all of you. You make the channel work. You are the channel. The whole reason I created the channel, like I said many times, is to have a community of Dolphins fans and have a conversation. And we've been able to achieve that, starting with this show, and then obviously the podcast rolled along, and we were able to do the same thing there. And it's awesome. It's awesome. So that's gonna be it, guys. That has been your Miami Dolphins fan Q&A for this week. I am Skaggs1383, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Let's get through the rigmarole before we jump into the podcast. Remember, guys, this podcast posts each and every single Wednesday. The first segment of the show, we go through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. The second segment of the show, we go through all the AFC East news you need to know about. And the third and final segment, we go through the Miami Dolphins fan Q&A.